So perhaps we can start, if a few other folks show up, that'd be great. And all they'll miss is my introduction, which won't be the highlight of what we're doing. So I might as well launch because we want to be sure we have enough time for Nick to, show what he has prepared and also have some time for questions. And I think the way we'll handle those questions is, as Nick goes along with his talk, if you would just put into chat that you have a question. You don't have to write the whole question into the chat. Just say your name and I have a question. And then Bill Geist, my colleague, will help navigate through that. And first come, first serve. And then Nick can answer them in that fashion. So you can think of a question, during the talk, rather than having to come up with them all just at the end of the talk. So in any case, however you think about that, just put your name in and then say, I have a question. And we'll do that as they show up. I think the question part of these kinds of conversations, these kinds of talks is one of the most interesting. And I'm sure that Nick's work will raise a few questions amongst all of you. So in any case, welcome to Nick's Lenker's Zoom talk, sponsored by the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum. I'm trying to remember to look at the green dot, that's my camera, so that you can see me. In any case, I'm Wayne Higbee. I'm the director and chief curator of the Ceramic Art Museum. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to introduce you to Nick Lenker and have him introduce his work, which I think is quite extraordinary. Back in March, I think around the 16th of March, we had to close the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum because of the pandemic. And of course, I began to work totally on Zoom, meeting with my colleagues, meeting with people across the country, working on exhibitions. Everything I did to do business for the museum had to be through virtual reality, through the internet. And that, of course, was the case for most of us. I remember getting started with my graduate seminar and having to do that virtually. And it worked out, but it was challenging to get adjusted. But during that time, back in March, I began to think more about virtual reality. I'm not necessarily part of the generation who is constantly involved in that. And if I can get away from my computer, sometimes I enjoy doing that. So I thought about how do I create, or how is it possible to create a virtual reality exhibition for the museum? Perhaps not simply a video walkthrough of the museum, but an actual exhibition that would be mounted on the museum website as a virtual offering. And the more I thought about that, the more I just kind of began to realize I didn't know much about what I was thinking. So I reached out to a friend who eventually became guest curator for this exhibition, fellow artist named Kelsey Chase Folsom. And with him and a company called Primal Screen, we together invented this exhibition called Full Capacity. And now you can go to the museum's website, ceramicsmuseum.alfred.edu, and click enter on this painting of the daisies, and it will take you to this virtual reality offering. So do that, enjoy doing that. It's an experiment for us. I would appreciate any kind of feedback I can get, because it was a very unusual thing for the Ceramic Art Museum to try and do. But in the course of all of that, back in March, I began to think more and more about Nick Lenker's work, which I had first seen at the NCECA conference in 2019. His work is extraordinary. I don't know how to explain it, and that's why he's here to explain it and to elucidate it himself. But the way he works between this kind of physical space, this real quote unquote space of ceramic materials and processes, and then also balances that kind of this nexus between that kind of real space and the virtual reality space that we experience through the internet. Became more and more fascinating to me as I began to think about this project of full capacity. So I emailed him and I said, so Nick, how would you like to do an exhibition at the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum? And it was pretty short notice, and I apologize for that. But fortunately, he accepted the challenge and came up and installed this extraordinary, really wonderful, challenging, provocative exhibition in the showcases at the top of the ramp as you come in the museum. So I'm so excited about that, and I'm very pleased that he's here. And I've seen some of the presentations that he's given. The NCICA presentation is been recorded. You can access that, I think probably on YouTube. It was an extraordinary talk, one of the best I've heard at NCICA. So if you'll give me just another minute, I'll read you a couple of things that will put Nick's background a little more in context. So Nick is a graduate of the University of the Arts with a BFA and the Tyler School of Art with an MFA, both in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Nick exhibited work in Creating Space that was hosted here at Alfred University by the School of Art and Design in 2018. His work has appeared in numerous other venues as well, including Moore College of Art and Design, the Practice Gallery, both in Philadelphia, and the StoneFox Artspace in New York City. Nick Lenker lives and works in Philadelphia and is a current resident artist at the Clay Studio. Nick has been selected as an emerging artist, as I mentioned, at the 2019 Minneapolis NCICA. That NCICA was called Claytopia. And in 2019, he completed a public commission for a project Holmes Gloria Casares. Casares, is that how you pronounce it, Nick?
I think it's Casares.
Casares. Gloria Casares Residence. This is a LGBTQ, young adult focused homeless prevention project, and the first of its kind in Pennsylvania. Nick was nominated for a Pew Fellowship in 2017 and is currently up for a United States Artist Fellowship. Nick is one of the most conceptually thoughtful and exceptionally skilled ceramic artists working today. That's my opinion. Many people share it. So welcome, Nick. Take it away.
Okay, I'm gonna share the screen now. Thank you, Wayne. Oh, Bill, I think you'll have to allow me to do that.
Is Bill paying attention? Hello, Bill.
Is it working now?
We just need Nick to be full screen.
No, it still hasn't.
Uh-oh. Okay, hold on. It should be.
Okay, did it work yet?
I don't know why it's not working. It says I've allowed that. Hold on, let me. I just made you the host, so see if that you can do it now.
Okay.
Yay!
All right, you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I was gonna try to go through a couple projects, starting with one I did in 2010 for the NCICA in Philadelphia. That was called Destruction and Creation of Man. This is actually the first piece I made using ceramic decals, which feels a long time ago. That was in 2008, right before the financial crisis. So I changed the way I worked, and this is a shortened version of the work that I made for that. It's a video. And I was really interested in sort of alchemical drawings and Wicca and stuff. And so this work is a lot about transformation. It involves like the ceramic processes, or like heating up the material, cooling it down. There's two figures, they're male and female, and they sort of balance each other around this circle of flames and walk clockwise. There's 12 fires, so it's about time and the movement of time and how that affects sort of change. And so I made this video. This was all sort of written out in advance. Like I figured out like what I needed for this sort of ritualistic thing, and made the objects so they were actually functional ritualistic objects. Like I wanted them to have sort of this power as having been used in some way, not just a pretty object. And this was an overnight thing. It was pretty. It was a cool experience. Oops. All right, so these are some images from that place, which are very unreal looking because someone didn't know how to use a camera. And these are pictures from the exhibition, which is kind of more of a documentation of that thing. I don't know what the art is. Is this the art, or is that doing the thing, the art? So I made all these objects. This is a triptych I made, sort of like, this is all digital collage, made the frame, everything. Sort of is referencing the tree of life and Adam and Eve sort of prints. This is like a puke bucket that I made that was like part of the ritual, sort of expelling negative energy after the end of it. So that's like an effigy of myself. This is a mask, like Halo and the death mask. And like, so I've always worked with like digital collage and photo collage, sort of going back and forth between, you know, the video is very real and this stuff is sort of these symbolic images of the thing, but made out of photographs. And then I went to grad school, and this is a piece I made in grad school. So back then, someone came to that show and was like, "This looks like a stoner's basement." Some guy who was playing D&D or something. So I kind of like the idea of that because that's basically who I am. And so I was like looking at man cave spaces and sort of exploring that world, and like descent, as you know, going underground into a cave to find yourself, kind of these rites of passage. This piece was sort of integral to what I ended up doing. It has sort of these three sections. And then, so this is my thesis stuff. So I built this whole set and lived in this gallery for 3 days. This work is called the Apocalypse of Now, or the last days of the apocalypse of now. So I made everything. Everything had some kind of function, and I lived in this space for 3 days, blocked out all the light. This is the door to the bedroom that I lived in. So yeah, everything had a function and purpose, and it was, so every day I would sleep in this bed and wake up a new person. It's kind of a, and here's like, I'm going back and forth between what's real and what's not. This is like an exercise grow room that I worked out in every day. And like, I didn't really plan for it to be like a cross, but ended up being like this cross. I don't know. I mean, I grew up in a very religious background, so some of this stuff comes through in this. And sorry, made this wash basin and cleaned myself every day. Each day was a different stage in my development. So like I was like, all the actions I did were like reflective of childhood. And then the second day was all these actions reflective of adolescence. And then the last day was sort of like a death of like the stage of life that I was in at that time. So like adulthood. And I had like costuming that I had made called like shadow suits. So they're kind of like these death shrouds. And every moment of the day was scheduled out. This piece is really kind of where the newest work came from. It's sort of like this entertainment system that sort of like everything that goes into the way you perceive the world. It's about perception and like, I'm having trouble here. I'm sorry. It's like a shrine. This was the video that was playing on that shrine on repeat. So this is what I was listening to at 24 hours a day. And it was a performance I did within a game world, sort of destroying different aspects of self. So one of the things I destroy is like a headless, hairy man. So like the physical aspect of self. And then the other thing is like a floating brain. So it's like raw intellect. So it's kind of like destruction of self, like, and renewal in the same way. So this is like Christ-like sort of stuff going on in a lot of this stuff. I'm interested in the transformation. There's a lot of like interaction with other people. So I had people give me sort of specific things to do, people who had impacted my identity in some way. And that was part of the work I did in this space. And it did feel a little bit like social media had a lot to do sort of like with the documentation of this. Like I had all this stuff planned, but it ended up spending a lot of time sort of just documenting what was happening and not really getting to the thing I wanted to do. So I made this bar too, and every night there would be this performance I would do like called opening, where I would be the bartender and sort of facilitate this social interaction with these people who came. And this piece was kind of like, it's kind of like the Last Supper. You have these wine, everyone's facing the same way. Like it's at the end of the last call. There is this focus on sort of endings in this work that was like, apocalypse is like the end, but also the beginnings of, so I'm interested in change in that regard. Ended up being like a 3-day sort of bender where I barely ate and like partied a lot at night and then did all this stuff during the day. I would board up these sort of zombie windows of each stage of my life. So this first one is like my childhood home made from memory, like constructed by photographs, and I would board these up as if like, you know, keeping out these living dead. And then after that work, after I got out of grad school, I made another piece that was sort of inspired a lot by redware pottery. I had like done demo on this house that was like an old German family's house that a mentor of mine had bought. And so I was inside this house revealing history with an ex-boyfriend. And then, you know, that relationship ended in like, so after that, I sort of made this work about loss in general. And this is a shortened version of that video. And it's like a lot inspired by Pennsylvania redware pottery from that time period, sort of the decorative motifs from that culture. I mean, there's a lot to this stuff. You know, I'm dressed like the survivalist. There's stuff, a lot of stuff about, you know, masculinity, and this was during the rise of sort of the Tea Party stuff, and thinking about like my own family's loss of their family farms and like the loss of sort of this wealth in that rural area. I mean, generally this is about the destruction of that relationship I had, and sort of breaking things down and making this embodiment of my own sort of depression and sadness. But this is a lot about process of making something, but in like a strange way. Yeah. So this work, I don't know. I mean, the floor is covered in ash. It's a lot about loss and like, you know, this material that you know, it's the leftovers from something that gave you warmth. It's, you know, they're like did research at the PMA. Like this is a plate from that time period, and you know, their inscriptions are like very, you know, poetic. And this one particular really moved me. So like this stuff I do like before I even begin the projects. I like make a whole outline. I try to render the space like and understand like how I kind of want it to look. Not everything gets into the end results. You know, this shadow cowboy. I mean, there's a lot about sort of like this like thin veneer of like this masculinity that I'm trying to destroy and like take the whatever's coming out of that and like reimagine it into something that's like positive in the end, or just to get rid of something. So you know, every object is designed for a very specific purpose. So the function does definitely influence what I'm making, and I come up with those functions sort of narratively through writing and outlining the project. This is the exhibition that resulted from that at Practice Gallery. These are some of the pieces. These are all like sort of remaking these hex signs. Some of them describe like the actions that were occurring in the video. Man. Sorry, people are trying to enter and I like cannot see my cursor to let them in. Yeah, so here's some of the pots I made for that. You know, the function, they become like relics in the end. Like they hold more power for me personally because they went through this, you know, these actions were made, or like they were functional in a very, you know, specific way. And this is actually moth wings that are embedded in the chest of this latex figure. You know, I wanted the mold to like be a special object. So after that, then I like was focusing much more on anyway, I was focusing much more on sort of how the way social media was like sort of making me feel. Like I like to say that most of this new work is sort of spurred from sort of watching, just accidentally stalking my ex through Instagram and like how that made me feel. So I followed this sort of feeling, and everything that went into that I sort of explored and wrote into this outline. And so that most of this work has come from that. This is at Moore College of Art. This is sort of the first piece I made in relation to that work. So it's, you know, trying to like make a photographic skin of the object that it is using decals. Here is like another, you know, me rendering out the space in advance to try to like figure out what I wanted to look like. This is outside of the space. It was a window space, so it was, you know, sort of good for that work because it's, you know, a lot about voyeurism and you are actually being watched while you're in the space. This entry to that space. I think there's like 40 some ceramic objects, and yeah, I wanted them to look like they were like made in a 3D modeling program, sort of like they were game objects, and in this like 3D gridded out space that adds to that. I made this spandex skin of my own body, so you can kind of, this whole work was about sort of trying to like strip away parts of my identity I have absorbed from others. So I was thinking about other people and how I've like taken parts of my identity from them and sort of wanting to make these animations that were like specific moments that I've shared together with one other person, and recreating them in the animations.
It is all very surface.
This is
These
the video
into
from
lives that
the
are not
Ensika talk,
exactly
which
real, not
probably would do a better
exactly
job for
false.
me
What is
talking.
between his screen and mine? I saw a void between space. Something is there. It can enter our personal space, take from us. It has no identity. It is skinless, faceless. It steals from us to create. I want the objects to exist in the physical as well as in the virtual, which is real. How do things change when you see them only on a screen? Are they real? What happens when something exists in both spaces? I grew up playing games. Were they real? A projection of self into another world. I wanted to be a part of those places, touch those objects, talk to those people. I'm forcing those things to be more tangible through recreation. Are they real? How do things translate from a virtual space? It is shallow. What about when it has depth? What is real? When does it become fake? When does a copy become original? How does change the way it's viewed? Through whose eyes are we viewing it? Are they real? When does the third person become the first person? It has gone cold. It was hot. This will last forever. How does it change when seen in a new context? When it is destroyed through change, will it ever be recognizable again? These are objects of power, attained when most needed. Is it real? Experiences that exist only in a mind's eye. How do you view a memory? Is it real? Is it historically accurate or skewed by current perspective? If we tagged our memory, would we recognize ourselves through the eyes of another? Am I real? Reach out and touch someone, only one in the crowd. How do you connect with one person when sharing with all? Is it real? Life is still life. I see value. I see worth. Does it have substance? Is it real? Can it help her? Will it heal her? Does the belief in its power make it real? So fragile, so vulnerable, it will not fall. Is it real? This was real. I was there. Such beauty. But is it still real even as a recreation of a memory? I am you. This was now. Take a bite. It's only a dream. You will wake up and know where you are. No response. A friendly ghost. It happened. I have picked. It was real. I saw you first. It always begins this way. You did nothing wrong. You are real because you died. Time has slipped. Is it real? Two became one. Split and wore the skin of another. Never had a chance. Just die. Ghosts aren't real. Still don't haunt me. You need substance. You need skin. The skin doesn't fit you. That face is loose, not special, just another copy. Which one is the real one? Time has stopped 5 years ago. I see you scrolling, that memory next to the cliff, the same cliff, 3 years later. My face is different. The light has died. Is it real? We had to go to an island to have a conversation. No communication anymore, but we text every day. Don't let the light go out. Text me when it goes dark. Stop looking down at me. Look up at you. You are real.
So anyway, yeah, like I said, that most of this work came from this piece. I was thinking a lot about sort of the way we interact with screens and how our lives can be really consumed by that. Oh man. These are some original sort of renderings of like sort of me just thinking about the space. Like I kind of like wanted to make this void space where anything was possible. So a space between two screens, like what is influencing how I see the thing on the other side of the screen. So what that is like social media companies, probably advertisers, how the other person wants themselves to be seen. It's like this manipulative sort of influence space. Here's I'm just thinking about sort of like game worlds and how you can exist in a space and also exist in another space and embody another person for a short time. These are all the sort of images I looked at. Like the shelving was kind of like interested in sort of like these meandering labyrinthian video game maps, sort of like these like very particular perspectives, the way like three-dimensional forms are rendered on two-dimensional screens. These sort of plexiglass vitrine boxes, cubes, whatever. I'm sort of looking at like inventory screens in games, the way like objects are like contained within those spaces. Which is, you know, the name of the title of the exhibition at Alfred is Inventory, which is what I'm talking about there, these spaces. So you can sort of see how that relates. Yeah, identity in general. It's like very malleable online. Like you can just be anything you want. Like you can create an entirely different persona, avatar, same way as in games. Like social media and gaming are very similar at this moment. Like I wanted this costuming to be like anyone could sort of wear my face, be me. You know, these haptic suits like in virtual reality to like give you feedback, and like there will be a time when we can embody someone else, and it will be an interesting, there's already studies being done where they do that and it affects your personality. So this is a costume I made, and I had this friend of mine who's a dancer. She like embodied me and like was in the space, and these images are kind of weird because they almost look like renderings. But I gave her certain prompts to do the sort of movement-based performative actions in this space. You know, I'm like, I also like, I reference art history a lot. I mean, even in the, you know, the other things, I do look in the past to like think about how I make these objects and how they're displayed. You know, this is about leaving an identity behind and donning someone else's. But also like it's creation. We're creating new worlds here. Like this is the start of a whole new world. Again, I'm just interested in these sort of like religious creation stories, creation art. The snake in there. So, I mean, some of the animations I was looking at the character creation screen in games. So, I mean, you could talk about the same when you're creating your profile on Instagram or like, you know, Facebook, you're choosing what you put on there. So like these are earlier games, like how you would sort of create your character for this game world. And I'm like, I was looking at that kind of stuff to like make some of this one particular animation, which I'll show in a minute. So you can sort of adjust like the way you look, and like that kind of malleability is like, I wish I could do that myself. You know, some of these are the people that I was sort of talking about, like taking identity from them to absorb into my own self. Like, what does it mean to be a person? Like, if you're like just absorbing other people's personalities. So this is, I think that is that the video? No, this is the video I'm talking about. Which is also sort of referencing the golem, and which I, you know, that first video I showed that's all golem inspired. malleable clay, changing your form, changing shape. This is the video that reference sort of character creation. Yeah, so that video was about someone who had a pretty big impact on my artistic life. So it took place in the studio. He's like, forming the formless. Anyway, in the center of the room, there's this mirror. I made this mirror because, well, I had a sort of narrative thing that, this space was a functional space at one point in the project. I mean, it sort of like wavered from there, but I wanted to have this sort of like machine that was like able to create anything, like to take things from other people's lives. So, I mean, this sort of form, I wanted to sort of reference sort of like satellites and like, things that collect light. Like I saw this exhibition of Voodoo Mirrors. They had such presence and like large power. Like I just wanted something like that. But sort of like, take light, amplifies light, takes the image from one source and shatters it into a lot of different perspectives. I was just looking at some weird stuff here. Yeah, I'm like referencing stuff from games I played when I was a kid. Even this character is like, it's from a game called Black Gate, I think, which is like, this creature that comes through a black gate and influences the world. It's very, very similar to yeah. So anyway, each of these animations, there's 14 in all. They're each about specific people, but there's always like this skinless, faceless, identityless like creature like sort of talks and interrupts the narrative, and it sort of influences the way you sort of see what's happening. So in this one particular, which I think I'll show in a minute, there's this one that says you're killing it and it's like enthusiastic, and there's one that's called killing it sorrowful. So I'm interested in like how your narratives are manipulated online to like, how what is affecting the way you sort of see like this base narrative. And this work was made during the the run up to the 2016 election. So is kind of like, I think I was absorbing a lot of like sort of like online stuff where, you know, even this like red and blue, you know, scheme is like interesting to me. This one is about, I think like my first boyfriend, he worked at a amusement park, sort of like a coming into my sexuality kind of narrative. And this one sort of became more dreamlike. I mean, they're all somewhat surreal. Yeah, so anyway, that was, yeah. Anyway, these are the objects that were in each of the videos where each of these objects have a video related to them. So this one's about my mother, their ex-boyfriend. This one, yeah. I try to make them, you know, they are very personal, but I try to sort of influence the narrative so it's a little bit more universal. All right. Yeah, so some of these other ones, they all have videos related to them. You can see the whole video on my website if you're interested. I think I'll show one more, two more maybe. Yeah, so like a lot of these, like I talked about the character creation screen, I've like tried to reference certain genres in gaming. So like there's this one video that I made that's, you know, referencing driving games in general. And this one is about my brothers and adolescence in general. But this is also a recreation of a experience I've had with them. Yeah, so that's, you know, it's an experience I had, but also like I'm trying to like talk about like, you know, reckless youth and that sort of, I want to, that's the kind of thing I'm trying to be more open-ended with my specific narratives. So I think another thing, yeah, there's a lot about voyeurism in this. Even this, you know, this image, I mean, it looks like, you know, it's eyes without a face. It's a screen. It's like this phone size thing. I don't know you. It's like you can look at anyone at any time anymore, and they don't know you're there. So there's this a lot of stuff about, you know, voyeurism in this work, and like I said, it was, you know, a window face gallery. So you can be watched as you're watching the videos of you or being a voyeur and also being watched. So it's like wanted to reinforce that. You know, even the screen on the ceiling, I wanted to sort of invert the, you know, our typical gaze when we're like looking at our phones and sort of have to force you to look up as if you were in the phone. Like, yeah. All these images were made, all this animation was done on Photoshop mostly. I mean, I don't know how to do 3D modeling, so it's all sort of an analog way of, semi-analog way of like doing this like thing that's supposed to be three-dimensional. This is another video that's about my mother. All right. So, and then after that work, I mean, after that show, I basically went right into the Gloria Casara's public work that I don't have images of, but you can see that on my website. And that afforded me the money to buy a ceramic decal printer, which is an expensive purchase, but it has been like really great to have it. So I've been trying to push some of the ceramic works into like make things larger things. And this is a installation I made for, I think when the American Craft Council convention came to Philly in, I don't remember, I guess it was last October. Yeah, so I made this Medusa head, and this work was called Disembodied Gazer, which is also I'm talking about being disembodied in another person's body while you're online viewing someone else's, um, you're sort of just like frozen in someone else's skin, living through their, looking through their eyes. I'm interested in the image of Medusa because of the way sort of things sort of get frozen in time in online. Like you can scroll back years and see what someone's did like 5 years ago, and it's all on the same page. It's like time has stopped. It's like still, and we also all just staring at screens like all the time. It's like you're frozen. Like the gaze in general in the image and narrative of the Medusa is interesting to me, as an image. And I threw in some of these process stuff. So I make stuff in parts sometimes if it's like complicated and it's going to be like way too complicated for me to make it as a whole. So like these were all made in parts and then assembled afterwards. So I make paper templates of like every surface, and then I'll put that on Photoshop, and I have to make the skin or the decals on Photoshop, which can be really complicated sometimes. Like three-dimensional stuff is like, you can see all these snake stuff was like made like collage from like found images online, and that can be really difficult. I mean, it's a little easier when you're using a subject you can photograph, like myself for this piece, to sort of like cut the section out that you need. But yeah, it still can be like kind of gross. That was almost more complicated than making the piece sometimes. But then I'll do like photographs and then sort of render it out so I can see what like the end result's going to be, because it's like really hard to sort of imagine the two-dimensional thing wrapping around the surface of the three-dimensional thing. And so I want to like play with the color and see what color I'd like the best. I'll do that on virtually on like Photoshop and just see. And then I'll print it, and if it doesn't look right, I'll have to adjust some stuff. But this piece I had to sort of play around with some adjustments in color and stuff like that. For these plants, I did a similar thing where I glued pieces together to get sort of really angular extreme forms. Here's like sort of some of the application process for those strange plants. This piece was also pretty complicated because this is all done with like found images, which is, you think like, oh, it's just fur, but it's it's not fur. That's like really, it can be really complicated. And I'm just going through these are the files that go along with each piece, so you can sort of see what that's like. Yeah, so I mean, if I was going to do this commercially, if I didn't have a printer, it would be so expensive. Like, I mean, the printer itself is really expensive and the materials are expensive, but at cost, it's like reasonable to do this work. And most of these pieces are in the show at Alfred, so you can go see them. This piece I did like for a collab with the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So we went into their collections and looked at a couple pieces and then made a response piece. I think this is like 20 some inches tall. It's like pretty large, but it's like the two Rockies. It's Creed and the new Rocky and the old Rocky fighting. And also just like somewhat political. Yeah, train. Anyway, that's pretty much all I had here. So we can move on to questions if you have them. I don't know how to return this to you, Bill.
Oh, I got it.
Okay.
All right. So if I don't see anybody typed over in the chat for questions, but if anybody has a question, there's not a ton of us here. So maybe if anybody just wants to just kind of jump in if they have a question.
What's your favorite part of your process? I mean, it seems like you obviously spend time physically making pieces, but then spend time on the computer as well. I'm just wondering if you have a favorite part of your process.
Yeah, I mean, the processes can get really tedious. I wouldn't say that the decal making is my favorite at this point because I've been spending so much time on screens. It's really hard to like want to be in front of a computer even more. But I mean, I enjoy the slab building and making the objects. But really how I enjoy is like the end when it's done. That's my favorite part. Or, you know, coming up with the sort of complex layered concepts in the very beginning, which, you know, I've been formulating a new sort of body of work that I've been doing that with, which can be exciting because it's, I don't know, it's just, you know, sort of make connections and put that stuff down and try to make it all make sense in some crazy way.
I have a question about, I'm wondering in terms of your, like what keeps you object, I guess not object based, but like how do you have a push or a pull between, you know, sort of this, is it real? Is it not real? You're working in animation, you're working digitally, but then you're also working in this very physical object world. Is that sort of a, sometimes you trend one way or the other way, or why stay physical? Why do you need these physical objects, or why do you need the digital work? Or are they key to each other maybe?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that the work is about sort of like having a foot in both worlds, like as far as like us, you know, spending so much time virtually and interacting with other people with our online avatars. I mean, I'm connected with clay. I mean, it's what I know. I couldn't imagine just doing just all like digital or just all, I mean, I've been using decals for like 10 years and it's like I have this, you know, the online digital work and then, you know, the connection happens with the ceramics. I don't know if that answers the question. Like, I think there's something interesting about like the foot in both worlds thing, which is like how we all sort of live right now.
So more of like an additive nature in that they both want, I don't know, like individually their own thing, but together they can maybe expand upon each other.
Yeah, I'm kind of like bring one into one world and the other into this world. It's like sort of trying to find this space between those two spaces. Even while I'm like making the decals for a certain object, it's interesting to like, it's almost like life drawing or something, but the life is lived online. So it's like, oh, if I want to make an elephant, like I'm looking at hundreds and hundreds of pictures of elephants to try to figure out like, how do I make this little object of an elephant look like an elephant? So I'm looking at objects, but they're images of an elephant online. It's interesting. I think it's interesting. I mean, all this digital stuff for me feels a lot like drawing. It's like trying to figure out what this thing's going to look like. Like I don't really draw that much. Sometimes I do when I'm trying to figure out a form for ceramics, but I mean, when I try to envision a show or something, it's all Photoshop, collage.
More questions?
I have a question. And Nick, you know, I'm taking, I've not played any video games really in my life, or virtual reality games, but I'm curious about the sound. I imagine that you're composing the sound as well to go with the videos. Is that right? Is that sound simply, you know, lifted from a particular game or something and recomposed?
Yeah, that was actually a collaboration with someone I know, J Plus he goes by that. He does DJ work in Philly, and he was amazing. Like I never actually met him before the show. Like a friend of mine suggested, like he's amazing, just work with him. And like so I sent him one of the videos I had done, and sort of like, these are the things I'm interested in it sounding like. And he just like sent back something, and I was like, that's great. Like I can totally trust you, like do your thing. And it was, some of them like I was like, that's not exactly how I imagined that, but it was cool. It was cool.
It was, I mean, it was curious to me because you know, when you spoke about, well, this one has to do with my mother, this has to do with this incident or that autobiographical incident, you know, and so I thought of them as kind of self-reflective examinations in some sense, but then the sound also feels like there's this overlying kind of existential dread, you know, the way the sound hits the images. And I was just trying to imagine them, you know, if it was a very different kind of sound, you know, what I would, you know, feel from the images, you know.
I don't know if it's just chronological, but it seemed like you were a lot more physically present in your earlier work. And I'm wondering if that was a choice you made. It seems like in one of the later pieces, you know, you have somebody dressing up as you, and now maybe you're not in your work at all. Is that something that you're removing yourself from? Is that having to do with this virtual world versus real world? I feel like everybody's frozen.
Yeah, it looks like we lost Nick.
Yeah, I thought he froze up there.
We'll see if he tries to rejoin.
This is the community discussion section.
He's out.
He froze before he answered my question a little bit.
Yeah.
Aaron just jumped in.
Sorry, there was quiet silence, but I think it was just.
Where did he go?
I don't know. Well, that's a question we should ask him. Where does he?
Maybe he's not even real.
Do you think this was planned?
That's
Yeah.
a perfect Houdini move. I love it.
He is in
Very good.
Oh, here he is.
Where is he? I don't see him.
He's coming.
Oh, Nick, hey, welcome back. Are you there, Nick? There you are. I had an observation. I don't think it's a question, but I think there's probably a question embedded in it. It's back to Lucas, I think, a little bit. But can you hear me okay? Yes, can you hear me? Just say yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
You know, it's a question having to do with sense of place, a recognition that it seems embedded in the essential nature of human life, that we have a sense of place. And so the dislocation of place is a fascinating kind of challenge. You know, we could understand the world by place, and everything in the world kind of butts up against place in some fashion. So the creating of the ceramic object seems to reinforce objectness and placeness and gravity and thingness that somehow is part of what I understand gives me a sense of where am I? Who am I? What am I doing? So that's universal, perhaps, I don't know. I'd have to kind of, you probably could go back to some Greek philosopher like Aristotle who would explain this necessity of place in terms of how we understand the functioning of the universe and our place in it. And these, you know, the virtual reality sort of creates a gash or an opening in that. But it's interesting, you know, to me that all the gaming things also have these kind of fundamental questionings, you know, about existence in one form or another. The other night I was watching Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's a Robert Louis Stevenson movie, of course. And I think it's, this one I was watching, it had Spencer Tracy as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And of course, he's trying to figure out this nature of man, this nature of humanness, so that he has a good side, but he also is wrapped up in this kind of questioning, sort of challenging, sort of run amok side, and how he's disciplined by society, but also, so, you know, he drinks his potion and then he turns into Hyde, and you play that through. But I think there's a question embedded that is just totally universal in terms of how we house all these potential imaginative aspects, but at the same time, we have this kind of sense of place that grounds us in a kind of context. And your work seems just so brilliantly to navigate all that, you know, and so skillfully to navigate that conceptually. And the way you're in touch with your own personal experience and can bring that experience into a realm where you can share it. And, you know, it doesn't seem, it seems on the one hand self-indulgent, and on the other hand not, because you're exploring this place that we all share. I mean, you touched on a universal sense of who am I and where am I and why am I and what is place? And are these my objects of place? I like that video where you had the choices of all the snow domes and all the other things that everybody else has. And this was hard. Which one are you going to pick? I thought that was very interesting. So that, you know, you pick that, and then that becomes something that's now sitting here in the museum. And it's all mitigated through these processes of intuition and self and experience. And yet it seems very resonant for me. You know, I think it's a talisman that helps me understand myself at the same time. Anyway, I'm just babbling on about how fascinated I am about your work. But place, yes. So we go back to the sense where Lucas was asking that question about why do you need to make the object? And this question of the necessity of place as a way of understanding. I'm writing an essay about your work. You know, sometime in the next millennium, I don't know.
Cool.
But
Yeah.
also time maybe, because like the work is located in a very specific time, right?
Yes, yeah.
Very, very, very specific time, which is not exactly now, but isn't very far in the past. It has a very strong sort of sense of that period of time, and you know, it's not completely contemporary. It's not like the kind of graphics you get today.
Mhm. Yeah, I have limited. I don't know if I could teach myself 3D animation at this point in my life, but maybe, I don't know. It's I think it was just the alluding to. I guess there's just a lot of nostalgia in it in general. Even the work itself is like these nostalgic memories of things. The objects are mementos that bring back memories from a certain time. It's like a souvenir.
That's very compelling. You know,
But I think you still get the, you know, it's the first person having a hand in there, you know, really sort of gives you kind of like a more invested way of seeing it or something.
I know that we missed a couple questions when we lost you for a second, Nick. So I didn't know if those people wanted to jump back in and ask their question again.
Yeah.
Me?
Yep, you can start.
I just had noticed that you're physically present in a lot of your earlier.
Right. What was the question? Like because I'm in the works themselves, that personally involved in it. What is that? What you mean?
Aaron, you're on mute.
Aaron, you have to unmute.
Oh, whoops.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I'm just, I'm wondering if, what that evolution was. It seems like you were physically present a lot more in your earlier work, or, you know, is that something you move back towards, or are you just, I mean, even in one of your later pieces, it seemed like you had somebody else wearing your skin. So is it like,
Right.
A pointed move to take yourself out of your work like that?
Yeah. I think the original concept behind that, the Moore show, the white gridded area show, I think I was planning on doing some similar to the last shows where I had like built this set and like had this real clear narrative, and after a certain point, like I still had that one performance thing where someone else was me, but I'm not that interested in doing performance myself generally. I mean, I'm not that type of person really. I mean, mostly I just doing it because I wanted the objects to have this function and have a use and then be involved in this sort of thing that I had come up with. But if I was gonna, maybe it needed to be me. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to not do that anymore if I can help it. I don't know.
So what kind of things went through your mind? I think it's really fascinating. You know, I would never have thought of this, but that's amazing that you did. You made a skin of yourself.
Right.
You asked someone else to wear it. And now
Yeah.
you're watching someone else wear your own skin. So, you know, something goes through your mind while you're watching that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to document it as best I could, which I did poorly, but yeah, it's kind of like that skin suit is super weird. Like, like I don't know. I mean, it's funny, but
No, it's really serious. It's very
yeah, I just
interesting.
wanted to.
And it's funny, but it's also very provocative.
I mean, it's the same way I made the ceramics. It's like making the skin of something. So
No,
did it in a different medium.
no, fascinating.
But that all came from like like I did want it to, like I think I was gonna make costuming like that for each person. So like within that narrative, I mean, the original thing, it got lost, but I'm like happy with the way it turned out. I just, you know, I had some specific plans, but it's like not all that, you can't do everything. But I had sort of planned on having multiple masks, so like it was, they could put on different identities.
And the other thing that happened there, if I'm not mistaken, was that you asked a friend who was a woman to wear your skin as
Right.
a man. And was that purposeful? It must have been purposeful in some way. Or you
Yeah,
found a friend who was willing to do it.
Yeah, she's a movement-based artist and lives in New York, and I had her come down and paid her to do it. And I think I had like a couple prompts for her. It was like performance of self, performance of gender, and something else, something that have to do with avatars. I mean, it was interesting. Her movements were interesting. I have some of the video, but it's such a poor quality that I haven't done anything with it really. But I mean, there's certain parts where she was like, it looked like she was like lagging or something in a game where she's like sort of like walking against the wall but wasn't going anywhere. I mean, that's a very specific game trope, but yeah, I mean, I'm interested in that. How do you embody the person, like I don't know. That was sort of a last minute decision too. I mean, I'm glad I did it, but it was also last week of the show. I was like, let me do this thing just so I can get the pictures.
Nick,
Yeah.
can you tell me about the in all the videos, the hand comes in your, is that your hand? Is that a virtual reality glove thing that comes in? How does that work precisely?
I made that. I mean, it is my hand. It's I made that's it's just a video. Like it took a bunch of photos of me grabbing something, and then I altered it, and then that's a layer that I can add to, that I added to like every video at the end.
Oh, I see. Because the one time I did put on a virtual reality thing, and you know your hand comes in to show you the controls, you know, in that space.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it was that, but this was not exactly that. That's not how it occurred. Okay.
No, like I said, it's kind of like there's probably a lot easier way to do it. I mean, all of those are constructed in Photoshop. It's kind of like this, like I figure out ways to do something, and it's maybe not the best way, but I mean, it definitely has like a particular look. It has its own handmade look in a way. It's a craft that
I prefer that. I mean, I like that you mentioned that you didn't know how to do 3D modeling, so you just found a way that somehow effective, but it has its own kind of artifacts and curiosities and collage look that's quite compelling, you know, that would be very different from if you had 3D modeled everything or something like that. So I kind of enjoy the way that work around a skill that you don't have kind of it operates, and I think it operates rather effectively in the videos.
Yeah. I generally like the way it looks. I mean, it's interesting, that one with the moth. Like I was trying to like figure out how to a way for it to like look like it's moving forward, and in that way, it just like it's moved all these like ferns around, and it just looks like so chaotic and surreal. It's just, I mean, I like the way it turned out, but it's like in the discovery, like trying to figure something out like that is weird. It's like,
yeah. Well, I guess it's like some of those, you know, early, you know, silent films like that Trip to the Moon or something, where there's a lot of cutouts and movements that are, you know, using whatever special effect, you know, very, you know, facades and things that create weird special effects that are obviously generated, you know, by drawing or cutouts or things like that. If you know what film I'm referring to, remind me of something like that.
You know, that reminds me of Carto and Blood of the Poet. Do you know this movie?
Something like that, yeah.
Yes, that's something everybody should look up. Fantastic. Amazing. Maybe the first surrealist film.
Mhm, mhm,
Is that where Orpheus?
Cutouts and things happen.
mhm, mhm.
Great. Very good. Very good. So how are we doing? More questions? You know, at 6 o'clock, we tend to end things that way, but I don't want to short circuit any of the conversation. Any more comments? You know, I think we could have a very long conversation. And it's just unfortunate we're not in the same room because that always may stimulate something as well. But this was great. I think being able to see your work this way was also apropos of the content of this work. So there are levels upon levels upon levels that I think we touched on here. And I want to invite you all to come back in, of course you will, and really take a look very carefully at this work. I was astonished when I saw it actually here in the space being installed, and then how Nick installed it, which was rather brilliant, I thought. I have a little bit of a passion for something called the coyote at the moment. The coyote seems so real and so virtual. Fascinating, fascinating piece. As are most of the other things, you know, I really enjoyed spending more time with the work. So thank you so much. I think you all should unmute, and then we'll just have a round of applause. Right? Thank you.
Great. I was gonna say, I'm sorry about the very beginning. Like, I feel like I was like kind of struggling in the beginning, and I didn't really get my thoughts out at that for those earlier projects, which, you know, I feel bad about. But this is a really weird experience. I've never done one of these before.
You know, Nick, you were real in this unreal space. And I thought I was really in the space with an artist thinking through the work. Nice. And so often, you know, I would hear an artist say, well, I don't know. And I thought, of course you don't. You know, you're making the work. The work is telling you what you know eventually.
I used to know, though.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my thoughts were all scattered.
I really liked the way you presented it as an artist thinking it through at the same time, although you had done it at a previous moment. So, you know, you're kind of hands on your head going, what was that like? It was very good. Cool. I really enjoyed it. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay. Next time.
Thank you.